Welcome to Financials with Ahawo. It's exciting to be with you as we continue on our podcast, Financial Wellness Conversations. We've been running on the topic around portfolio growth, and we are slowly coming to an end, and there are interesting things which it's really important for us to highlight. So allow me to start with a scripture, and we continue to build up on that. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 7, it says, "Wisdom is a principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all your getting, get understanding." Let's take another scripture again. It's Proverbs 23, verse 12. It says, "Apply your heart unto instruction, and your ears to the words of knowledge." Then there is verse 18, which says, "For surely there is an end, and your expectation shall not be cut off." So the first scripture, I'm connecting it to wisdom because we've been learning a lot, and it's easy to learn and be a perpetual knowledge taker, but we have to get to the place of application. And that means that knowledge is something that we will receive, but what do we decide to do with it? How do we build with the knowledge that we have already gained? So today we want to delve a bit more into what does it mean to look at our portfolio from the lens of risk? What does it mean to look at our portfolio from the lens of global markets and international growth? And even what does it mean to look at our portfolio from the lens of the do's and the don'ts? So let's start with risk. We had mentioned risk when we began our conversation earlier, and it's something that can really seem, like worrisome. What does this mean? Whenever you think of risk, you assign danger to it. And it's true. But the fact that it is a known thing means that it can also be addressed. So what are some of the things that you need to think about as you're maybe planning and strategizing that will help you to really be able to find your way around risk? So first of all, risk will easily be tied to time. What timelines do you have in mind? We don't plan only on short timelines, but we plan on a long term, medium term, short term, and immediate. So when we do this, you're able to balance out the items in your portfolio, and your portfolio is not too much at risk. Now, the other thing you think about is time. And when we are talking about time, I've detailed it in terms of short term, long term, but there's also the aspect of time in the sense of when is the right time to make the investment. Because today you could have 100,000 disposable, but when you look at what it will take, what else that money needs to do, you realize, no, this is not the right time to make this particular investment or to change my portfolio in this particular way. So have those two perspectives of time. Time in terms of how long it will take and things like that, and time in terms of the right time to move or to move out when it comes to your portfolio. The next thing is the amount. It's always easy to start with a small amount, especially if it's something that's new to you, especially if it's something that you're still exploring, something that you've been introduced to by a third party and you're not so familiar with it. It's super important for you to look at the amounts you're putting in. Of course, the higher the amount, the higher the risk, normally the higher the return, but you really have to balance that out so that you're not making a decision in the moment because you're like, hey, I have this 1 million, let me put it here, but you end up losing all of it. You can be like, I have this million, this is really good, but I'm only going to put 250,000 there for now. So what are you doing? You're still taking the risk, but you're weighing it and you're building yourself up progressively so that you can have an assurance. And of course, they say in life, there's nothing that doesn't involve risk, but there's a caution to which you can be able to bring yourself into a risky investment or things like that. The other thing is age. And this one usually has a best, like, no, am I too young? Am I too old? The way a portfolio runs for someone who'd be in their 30s, someone in their 40s, someone in their 20s, someone in their 50s is definitely different. I would never ask someone in their 60s to put all their pension fund in a very volatile market. That person is just about to be very anxious, be always checking. So such a person would probably tell them, okay, you want to try this, maybe do 20%. You could get a return from that, but your 80% has to be in a place that is well weighted and that will not cause you so much trouble. But I'll tell the 20-year-old, let's put 60%. And then let's see how we can be able to grow and balance this out over time. So these are key things that we need to think about. So what would expose a portfolio to risk? If you make a decision quickly, if you make a decision because everybody is making it, we know that, yes. If acts of nature happen, thankfully that is beyond us. We've seen different things happen globally, regionally, that someone can't control. That's different. There are market factors also that may be beyond you, whether it's in the local economy, in the larger economy, those are different. We could use an example of Kenya. Like the tax regime is changing. We know that our financial year is closing, the financial bill is about to be out, different things are going to be announced. So these are things that could help you to kind of think through your portfolio. Okay, what does this really mean for my portfolio? What does this really mean in the investment decisions that I'm about to make? But how is that important? It's important because when you take time to analyze risk instead of burying your head and saying, we'll deal with the trouble when it comes, then even when it comes, because it will come, you're better prepared for it. So what are some of the measures that now we take? Because we know this risk will come. We know that we have to prepare for this risk. So what is that thing that we are doing? One of the key things is to enact a way of protection. And we know protection mainly through insurance, but there's also protection through the mixing or the balancing out of your portfolio. There's also the protection of kind of taking time to really get to know what you want to do. The same thing I said at the beginning, hasty decisions. Don't rush into a decision. Don't do what everybody else is doing. Don't take time and ask yourself, what do I want my portfolio to have? Why do I want my portfolio to have this? How long do I want my portfolio to have this? Remember, we talked about some of this when we started the conversation, because the heart of building a portfolio is to do your best to build a portfolio that will sustain you at certain levels of return and will always be able to balance out. One of the things, though, that it's good to have at the back of your mind when it comes to risk is that over a given period of time, risk does tend to become a bit easier to manage. So take, for example, if you make a loss in 2026 and you stay put, you don't panic, you don't rush out of the market, you don't start to think hastily, and you say, okay, I've made this loss, but how about I stick it through because I've done the analysis, I've worked with a professional, and they're telling me everything looks okay. And you just tell yourself, let me keep it another 2 years. By 2029, there's a profit and you're able to see the return, because what went out in 2027, you've waited it out in the market, the time aspect, and it has been able to balance back to you. So as you're thinking around your risk profile, as you're building this portfolio, you have to be very cognizant to this and be ready to prepare for it. Because as you prepare for it, then you're able to keep a portfolio that is healthy and a portfolio that no matter what happens, if it loses value the way we said last time, you know how you'll address it. If it's growing slowly, you know how you are going to address it. So as we continue to think about that, it's important for me to highlight to you some of the do's and the don'ts when it comes to your portfolio growth. So come with me again to another scripture. And this time we'll go to the Old Testament and the New Testament. And this is a scripture that is spoken about a lot. We've had it time and time again. But allow me to give it and for us to build context together. So we're reading from 1 Timothy chapter 6 from verse 10 through to 11. And it says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. But you, O man of God, flee these things. Follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, and meekness." Every time as people of faith we think about finance, it's easy to say money is evil. But I remember listening to someone and they used a word which I'd call it a deep English. They said money doesn't have a value in that sense. Like it carries the value of who has it. So even for you as you're building your portfolio, there are the do's that will keep your portfolio in tandem with your values. And there are the don'ts that will help you to ensure that your portfolio does not walk away from what you intended when you are putting it into place. So allow me to bring this closer and for us to really think through this portfolio together. So what are some of the important things you're doing as you're building your portfolio? You're building over time. This will say it time and time again. Slow, steady, sure. No rush, no decisions in the spur of the moment. In fact, some decisions, even writing it down, praying over it. Because God is so intentional in wanting to join your financial wellness journey. But no one ever enters a conversation they're not invited, unless they're rude. So making time to really invite God into the different things that you are desiring to have in your portfolio. Taking time to research. Taking time to really look, okay, I've heard people talk about this particular fund. What does it mean? I've heard people talk about this particular property. What does it mean? I've heard people talk about this place where we can be able to, farm different things you're thinking in your portfolio. What does that mean? And when you do that, you're able to actually guard yourself. Then look at what are you able to start with. Start with what's in your hand. Some of us get so ambitious. We're like, no, I need to get money from here, take this loan, borrow from this person, like that. Remember, we talked about all the different things we can use to build our portfolio, but we also highlighted that they have their time, they have their place, and they have the how that we will make use of them. So you have to be very cognizant to the tools that you're using to build your portfolio. Then keep all your records. One of the things that is so disheartening is when you're trying to remember, oh, I bought that land. Did I ever change it? Oh, where is my share certificate? With which stockbroker did I register those particular shares? It's extremely important to keep your records. If you're signing contracts, sign them physically if you can. Scan it, keep a copy. Nowhere there. The same way you keep your certificates for education, birth certificate, passport, have these things at the same place so that you're able to quickly go and say, okay, this is worth this much. This is actually mine. This is good. Then also don't be afraid to have boring items in our portfolio. Today, with the way the world is going, everybody's like, no, me, I have this special fund. Hey, me, I'm investing in international markets. Hey, me, all good. But have the boring things. I remember one of my uncles asking me, do you have a SACCO account? And I'm just like, boring. Who invests in SACCO to give you a loan on your money? You know, there is sometimes we think, but when you're balancing your portfolio, some of these boring things are so stable. Your SACCO, you have shares worth 50,000 every year without fail. Unless something goes wrong, they will declare a dividend. You will receive your 2,000, 5,000. And then, so building your portfolio and not being so quick to pick up only the modern things, but remembering all this gold. So preserving your portfolio by having some of the traditional saving items, fixed deposit accounts, borrowing 8%, but your money is locked for 1 year. You will get your 8% the way you agreed and you live with it. So be very cautious that your portfolio has things that can really just be boring but also be very safe. Then seek the legal support. So this is not just the professional support of I'm working with a financial advisor, I'm working with a financial mentor, but seek the legal support that is needed where it comes to your portfolio. If it's to do tax planning, if it's to do proper registration, make sure that you have the legal support to run a portfolio that will be sustainable long term. Because we're also thinking of succession. Remember that many of us are not doing this only for ourselves. We have people who we care for, whether it's our parents, our guardians, our siblings, our children, our husband or wife. We are thinking about them. So we want the things that need to be legally instituted to be well done. The other thing are the don'ts. What are the things that you really have to be averse to as you're building this portfolio? So be very, very, very careful when you're making decisions in a group. Be very careful. Some of us have investments that are individual. Some of us have investments in a group, in a company. Read the fine print, please. I could tell you countless stories about narratives of people who just didn't read the fine print. And that was the beginning of the end. You lose quite a number of money, quite a lot of money, or quite a number of things, let me say it that way. Think through the timelines. There are investments that it makes sense to have for 5 years, but there are some that it makes sense to only have for 1 year. There are investments that it makes sense to have for 10 years, but there are some you need to have for just 5 years. So be very cognizant to even the timelines, as we said from the beginning. then whenever you've made a mistake, cut your loss. Don't stay there. Don't say, okay, I've already made this investment, it's a bad one, let me continue sinking money. No, call yourself for what I usually say an AGM, not a board meeting, a proper AGM. Accept the loss, calculate the loss, negotiate as much as possible to get what you can salvage and exit. I was having a conversation recently with a friend, and she had taken a certain product from an insurer, and they had told her, oh, this product is for 7 years, you're going to have to keep it and all of that. 1 year, I think, in, she was like, no, this is a bad decision. She pulled out. So one of her other friends stayed in. 7 years later, she was getting 77,000. It means your money has earned 11,000 per year. Honestly, no. It was not practical. So she sat back and she was like, I'm glad I cut my losses when I did, because then I was able to find a better avenue to put my money. So as you think through your portfolio, as you beef it up, as you strengthen it, as you want it to do best, the do's and don'ts are really to help you to come up with a portfolio that is above board, portfolio that you can write home about. And finally, we've talked a lot about investing locally. Allow me to challenge you to think about investing globally. And come with me to a scripture again. Now, this is from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 31. Just a minute. Proverbs 31 verse 14 is our first reading. And it says, she is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. We can take this from the Proverbs 31 list of the woman and what she does. And it was telling us that she's someone who did not only think about business where she was at, but she scaled. She thought about business globally. And today, because of the internet, because of online communities, there's so many things we can be able to access. The next reading is from Ecclesiastes. And this is from chapter 11, from verse 1 to verse 2. And it says, cast your bread upon the waters, for you shall find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 and also to 8, for you know not what evil shall be upon the earth. That's extremely, extremely important, that we are not only looking to be safe where we are, but we are pushing ourselves into areas that we naturally or normally would not put our money inside. So what are some of the places we can think about? Come closer. 1, metals. The market here in Kenya may not have grown, East Africa, but we are having a market like in South Africa that trades in metals, gold, platinum, silver, iron. Like, be willing to begin to explore. We have foreign markets through some of the international banks that are here. They are big banks which allow you to start slowly by slowly and have a portfolio that has a more global perspective. Then there are also special funds. And these are good because they can be very quick to make your return, giving you a good way to look at what's happening in other markets. But it's extremely important for you to understand which particular one works, what is the risk factor with it, and then being able to do it. Then you can also think about foreign markets for business. I always remember an example of 2 people. And they were talking about how they set up business in East Africa, one in Rwanda. And they set up their business in Rwanda, and it became easier for them to come and do business in Kenya. The other one set up their business in Tanzania, and it was such a good business that even the Tanzania government would call her, are you okay? Have all your products come in? Have you applied for this tax exemption in another country? Please note, these 2 are Kenyans. So what is the challenge to us? The challenge to us is to explore beyond our comfort zone. Ask ourselves, what is a need I can meet from a different place? And see if that is an opportunity to pursue. Whether you pursue it alone, whether you pursue it with others, because we know some of the laws in trading in other nations. But the important thing is not to tie yourself and to limit yourself that you must trade or you must engage in building a portfolio only where you're from. I was listening to one of my favorite Nigerian preachers. And she was just encouraging women. She mainly encourages women, calls women to do better with their finances. And she started by asking, how many have an iPhone? Hands went up. How many have a Samsung? Hands went up. How many use Facebook? Hands went up. How many use Zoom for your meetings? Hands went up. How many use Google? I've said Google. Zoom? Yes, I've said yes. Hands went up. And immediately she was like, I'm closing this meeting. How many of you have investments in any of this? Because now the markets are open and we can't buy. And the hands that went up in the room, that's now when she said, I'm closing this meeting now. It was a challenge to us. And she gave her own story. She said, I began asking questions. How can I invest in this? Yes, I may not be able to afford NYC 500 USD per share, but how can I participate? And that was the challenge she gave the women in the room. Go and find out in a legal way, in an easy way, how you can participate in global markets and start doing it. I don't want us to ever be afraid that our portfolio is too small to scale heights. And she said sometimes she has as little as 3,000 naira. Sorry, I don't have the conversion in another currency. But she was like, that 3,000 naira should convert it to USD and buy a share. Sometimes that's $10, $15. But what has she done? She has challenged herself and looked at her portfolio and seen the capacity for her portfolio to actually scale and have something from a global market. And Africa, we are one of the wealthiest continents. To tell you the honest truth, the world is looking this way. We've been hearing of meetings, summits. People are even coming from there. People who have never come to us. And we know leaving their economies to just come and understand, to found companies, to participate in the economy, to engage with the locals. So how much more those of us who are from here, can we push ourselves? Can we challenge ourselves to do more? And I read to us a scripture from Ecclesiastes to encourage us that we have to keep putting our hand with a strategy. That's something you'll hear me saying. But we have to keep putting our hands in all of these areas. Nothing should remain untouched. You'd rather, as I said, start with a smaller amount, start with a limited time, but make sure that your hand is out there. Make sure that your hand is part of what is happening in a market beyond your own market. So allow me to land with those new thoughts, to give you something to focus about, something to build up on, something to really encourage you. This portfolio will be a good portfolio because you're going to be very intentional with it. Thank you for listening. God bless you. It's Ahawo.